Hello, Tiaba.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
We're good. All right. Well, guys, why don't we go ahead and get started? So we'll see if anyone else joins us here. I know summertime, people are starting to think about vacations, right? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and begin. So, guys, welcome back. It is Thursday, June 6th. So good to see everybody here this morning. Now, speaking of vacation, right? People think about travel, they think about enjoying their time off. But I found this interesting article. So they were talking about this new word, bleisure. Bleisure. Now you might say, Mr. John, what is that? Bleisure. That sounds like a weird word. Well, one of the interesting things when we think about the COVID-19, the pandemic, is that people were not traveling so much during that time, but eventually we had kind of remote work, and the opportunity for people to travel and work at the same time. Now, I have certainly done some traveling and working at the same time. But what's interesting is since the end of the pandemic, I guess we could say what, 2022 maybe, uh, they've noticed that hotels have still had some problems with their business. So of course people are working and traveling at the same time, but one of the differences they noticed is that hotels really are still kind of recovering because many hotels in the United States depended on people traveling, especially during the summertime and especially from other countries. Well, anyway, it's interesting how that during this time, again, I don't know if you guys have stayed at hotels, but certainly one of the problems has been finding people to work at these hotels. So it's kind of been a combination of problems when it comes to this. So, anyway, they were interviewing different hotels around the United States, and they just noticed that basically more and more hotels are making it easy not to go to the front desk, using technology to get into the rooms, for example, but also that more people are working and traveling at the same time. So they referred to, excuse me, as kind of business and travel, or what they call business and leisure. Our French-speaking students, you might remember leisure, right, is a French word. Leisure is something like free time, right? Our free time. So anyway, I thought this was an interesting idea that thanks to technology, it's easier to travel, it's easier to do business at the same time. But it's interesting that hotels have seen kind of a drop in the number of people who are going and staying at hotels. In fact, they've noticed that basically fewer people work in hotels, about 10% almost fewer people. So hotel jobs have still had some problems. Again, there's the 2020 in data, right? And then today, again, about still not quite as many people who used to work in the hotel industry. And then, of course, when they talked about travel, well, this is a problem too. So, anyway, I thought this was interesting because we often think of technology as making our life easier, right? Technology is very helpful. But of course, with technology, well, some changes have happened, and one of the problems, of course, is hotels may not be offering as much as they used to, and of course, when hotels lost all of their workers, well, they've not gotten back many of those workers. So if you notice here in this case, it's not just people who are traveling for business, right? Business travel was always a big part of the hotel industry. Now it's kind of like people are traveling to kind of do a little bit of free time and business at the same time. So right now they're talking about that many hotels still do not have a what they call a full recovery. So I thought that was interesting. I think now in 2024, maybe more people are going to travel, maybe more people are going to stay in hotels. But for now, it's still kind of a problem after the pandemic. But I thought we would take a moment and talk about how technology maybe is changing our lives a little bit, especially when thinking about traveling. Right. So I think that's a big thing to think about when we think about that. So again, thinking about this word bleisure, business and leisure, working and traveling at the same time, has had some benefits, but other industries like hotels, they've kind of suffered a little bit. Well, so I thought what we would do today is talk, again, discuss technology a little bit, some expressions, using technology, and then returning to the topic we introduced on Tuesday and thinking about maybe what we are thinking about for our futures. This is something that's something we can think about here. All right, well, let's start with that first kind of greetings here for our first question of the day. So, again, thanks to technology, people are able to do many things more easily, right? Traveling and working at the same time. Now, this is going to be my situation. I'm going to take vacation here for the next couple of weeks, but I'm still going to teach a few classes and still work while I'm on vacation. So it does make that a lot easier, but I do think it's also sometimes caused some new problems. So here's my question for you guys this morning. Do you think technology has made life easier, or do you think it's just created new problems? So technology has certainly made many things easier, but for example, do you think technology has made it easier for us to work more? So that's something for us to think about. All right, so guys, what do you think? Do you think technology has made life easier, or do you think it's caused new problems, or maybe both? What do you think? Fatima, get us started.
So for me, as I said many times, technology has both sides. So she is positive and she got also negative
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, effect. But I gonna talk about last experience that I do
Okay.
that it's happened to me. There was a post cafe in Covington, and the GPS in my phone it's still rerouting all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And imagine that in one place I turn about 20 minutes in order to find that place, but I'm in the right place. But I keep turning around and around because every time I ask any person, he said, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the area. The phone tell me, but I cannot find the right side because it's in the top of a hotel.
Right.
But
Okay.
it's like the hotel has a name, but
Yeah.
the top has another different name. And the worker, for a reason, they don't know the place, even if they work in the hotel. So imagine if there is no phone, there is no internet, uh, and I couldn't reach the person who gonna tell me, yes, you are in the right place. I tell myself, how do people before get to the destination, especially in Newport and Covington, because it's really crazy there. It's not an easy place. It's you feel that it's like you are living with zombies because there is nobody, just homeless. Nobody that you can ask if you don't get in a building. Do you understand what I mean?
Well,
So it's really hard without technology.
now
For me,
I will say that's interesting. Like for directions for GPS, yes,
yes,
and,
yes,
and
I'm
I do.
lost.
Yeah, and then I think about now, like if I travel and go to
And
places.
all the way back to home,
Yeah.
I keep asking myself what was happening before the internet.
It's
In
like
my
we've
country, like you find people in the street, wherever you go, you find people. You can ask
sure.
them, and they gonna guide you. But here, everybody using a car.
Yeah.
It's hard to find somebody who is walking, especially in some cities.
Yeah,
So
like
how you gonna find
yeah, like
the
or
place?
well, I certainly agree in general with what you're saying. Now, I will say that Newport and Covington have kind of always been like that. you, I've lived here for like 25 years.
It's
Uh,
scary.
yeah, it's
Yes.
it's kind of always been like that. But I agree with you that it's kind of hard to think about how did we find any place in the past. We never thought about traffic. We had to listen to the radio. What's the traffic like? Or watch TV before we leave for work. So I agree with you. In some ways, we didn't know about these problems, so we just expected there might be problems. Now, with technology, we think we should have no problems. And when we find a problem, I think we get really angry really fast or frustrated really fast. I know sometimes I feel that way when I'm looking for a place. So I think you're right. Technology has certainly made, in general, finding places easier. But like you said, on the other hand, our expectations are very different, right? We expect technology to show us exactly, and sometimes it's still not perfect. So that's a good point. That's a very good point. All right. So Daniela, Tiaba, Pilard, what do you guys think about this question? Do you think it's made life easier? Do you think it's caused new problems, or maybe a little of both? What do you think, Daniela?
Yeah, I think the technology made life easier because you can have more communication with your friends or family
Sure.
from your country. I don't
Yeah,
know.
like WhatsApp, for example.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You have the information quickly.
Right.
I remember when I was little, when I was in school.
Hmm.
I remember to went to my library in my neighborhood, um, walking in the afternoon
Hmm.
to get my information, my homework, and now it's different.
Well, even just the word library. I mean, I remember, yeah, if you wanted to find
Yeah.
any information, you had to go to the library. Now we can just pretty much look online. So I think in some ways, yes, it's made it easier, but
At the same time,
yeah,
you have a lot of information. It's
yeah,
too much.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it's sort of we have a saying in English. It's sort of like drinking from a fire hose. When they use a
Yeah.
fire hose to put out a
Yeah.
fire. Yeah, so maybe I just need to drink a little bit. I just want a little bit of information. But now the internet is like a waterfall or a
Yeah.
fire hose in the face. So yeah, so in this case, maybe too much information is not so good because maybe we don't know what's good information and what's bad information. So libraries are still maybe good places to do that. So Danielle, I think that's a great point. Yeah. All right. So Tiaba, what about you? What do you think, Tiaba?
Uh, I think it's both
Yeah.
make life easier, but the problem I think it can make us lazy, become lazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Tiaba, some people might say online English classes are making us lazy. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's true.
You think so?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I completely agree, but I definitely think that the online learning experience is a different experience. Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
But I also think about, Tiaba, I've been a teacher a long time. And, one of the number one problems for my students was transportation. Many of my students didn't have cars or they couldn't drive. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
so that was a big disadvantage. Now students can just pick up their phones and join us in class.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good advantage. But I do agree. Sometimes we might say, oh, I'm too tired to go to English class, so maybe I'll just sleep in, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I certainly think that we have to change the way we think about different things. So I think that's a good point. I think maybe we don't want to think of it as being lazy, but certainly think about it differently. Um,
Yep.
okay, so that's true. We got access to a lot of things. Maybe we don't think as much about them. Okay,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's a good point. All right, Pilard, any ideas? What do you think, Pilard? Do you think technology has made life easier or caused new problems? What do you think?
Yes, Mr. John. Technology make life easy, but have also the problem.
Well,
More the peop-
what's a problem you think?
more the people now is not say no social skill.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely.
More the people now they focus on the phone or
That's right.
computer. When you come in the house, the kid is on the computer on the the iPad,
Yeah,
daddy is
anything.
in
Yeah.
phone, mommy is in computer. That
Now,
is really
well, Pilar is not just in the house; it's out in public too.
yeah, people too. Yeah, when you
Sure.
go outside, that everybody have your phone, no conversation. That
So, what do you do, Pilar? What do you do in that situation? So, like for example, if you go out, do you tell no phones, let's talk? What do
Yeah,
you say something?
I'm
Yeah.
trying to stay no phone, but it's very difficult because all the people close to you have a phone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe Pilar, next time, why don't you send a text message to everyone and say, "Look at me." Maybe you can do that next time. Well, I agree, Pilar. I see it. I see it everywhere. I see it at restaurants. I see it in all public places. Parents not talking to their kids. The parents are on the phone, like you said. The kids are on the phones. Now, I get it. Okay, guys, can you remember life before cell phones? Can you remember life before the internet? I mean, let's be honest. Yes, you would have to talk if you wanted to communicate, but then there were also times where things were just kind of boring, right? Nothing, you would be sitting and waiting for the bus or waiting for something. Yeah, so I understand. One thing the phones have done is they've made like time kind of the enemy. Like time, we shouldn't waste time, so let's just get on our phones. Well, but that's also wasting time in some ways. So I think one problem is people don't like to have any moment when they're bored. That's really what I think. I see people driving in their cars, they get to the stoplight, and what's the first thing they do? Text their friend or get on their phones. So I think it's really sad, right? I think it's sad because I don't know if children are really using their imaginations, and like you said, Pilar, talking. That's important. But I understand. I mean, I remember life before phones. When people were bored, what do you do? So, in this case, I think technology has made a lot of things easy, a lot of things wonderful. But I agree. I think communication is a big thing. Now, Daniela, I also agree with you, though. We can communicate with our family back in our countries much easier. I remember, back in the 1990s, people had to buy those phone cards. Do you guys remember the phone cards?
Oh yes, I remember.
Uh-huh.
I bought that to talk with my dad because he was here and I was in Argentina.
Uh-huh.
And I bought a lot of these cards. Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. Do you still have some of those cards?
Sorry, what?
Do you still have some of those cards?
Maybe I have one. Yes. Just for,
Yeah. Well, next time, look in your closet. Look in your look in a bag. You might. Oh my goodness, I have these old phone cards.
Now it's so different.
Yeah. Well,
just in a second, you can talk with I don't know, your mother.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I remember when my students would say, "Oh, I can only call my family at night, or I'd have to call them early in the morning because of the time difference." And so it would be just crazy, and like Fatima said, they were also often very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and of course, I also remember, guys, if my students wanted to send money to their families, they had to use Western Union or some sort of pay system where they would actually have to wire money. So some of you, again, might remember those. Now we have so many different ways, like PayPal and all these things. So a lot of differences, I think. So technology has certainly helped in a lot of ways. But I do agree with Pilar. I think when it comes to immediate communication, the people in your house, the people next door, we don't really communicate that much anymore. So honestly, I really have tried to stay away from social media these last few weeks. I just want a break. That's what I want, is a break. Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much for sharing your experiences about this. Now, let's think about technology. So that's what I want us to do here this morning. I have some expressions. Many of these expressions are kind of historical. Now, we've talked about this before. Again, we have some new students with us, but we've talked about that many expressions in language come from culture, they come from history, and so often students are confused. What does this expression mean? So the expressions we're going to learn here this morning are related to technology, but they also do have some historical connections. And you will still hear people use them today, even if the technology does not exist anymore. It's true. Many of these are kind of existing, even though we don't have these technologies. So, but let's practice them. Okay, so everybody, let's turn on the microphones for a moment. Come on, guys, turn on those microphones. And let's say these expressions together. Okay, so here's our first one. To get wires crossed.
To get
To
To
get
get
wires
wires
crossed.
Bells and whistles.
Bells and whistle.
To push the panic button.
To
To
push
push
the
the
panic
panic
button.
button.
Okay, now you can turn off your microphones there for a moment. Let's go back and talk about them very quickly. Now, I will explain the meanings and then I'll share a little bit about the history of these expressions. So let's talk about the first one, to get wires crossed. Now, the basic meaning of the expression today is to be confused because each person has a different idea about what is happening or what is said. So in other words, you say something, I say something, and we totally misunderstand each other. So the idea is we kind of get confused, or we think we have different sort of directions for our conversation. In fact, sometimes people might say to get lines crossed. Okay, you may hear that too. Thinking about like when you're driving a car, you may think of changing lanes and accidents, people, crossing on the wrong side of the road. But actually, this particular expression comes from the sort of old telephones, the early days of the telephone. Now, everyone here in the class, you're too young, right? You're too young to remember this, but a long time ago, we had human operators who would control the telephone systems. So you would call the operator, and then the operator would connect people to different phone numbers. Yeah, so maybe you've seen old movies like this where you see usually it's a woman, so usually women, this was a job women would do. But the idea is they would connect these lines. But of course, sometimes human operators can get confused. Sometimes they would cross the lines, right? And that's true. Yeah, so in the post office, okay. So in this case, when they say that the lines are crossed or the wires crossed, what that means is the operator accidentally plugged into the wrong phone number and you'd be talking to the wrong person. Now, of course, that doesn't really happen today, right? I mean, we're calling people on our phones. But, sometimes on Facebook, when people are posting, messages or comments, sometimes there's a time delay. Someone sends a message, and then when they're waiting for a response, you might send a response, and then the other person responds while they're waiting, and then suddenly your messages are not, you're not responding to the same message. So we still kind of have the same problem with social media or texting or things like that, but not like in the early days, right? The early days of the telephone, it was sometimes possible for lines to get crossed. So in this case, when we say, "Oh, we got our wires crossed," it just means we didn't communicate clearly to each other. We both were confused about the situation. Now, the next expression, bells and whistles, basically this is referring to those extra features that we like that are sometimes, when we buy a new car, we buy a new phone. These are those extra features that are nice, very nice, but they're not exactly necessary for the function of the machine. So often you might see people use bells and whistles with the words newest or the latest bells and whistles, because that means they have the most recent technological features. Now, for example, let's think about phones. Let's think about phones today, okay? So we'll see an example with some cell phones in just a moment. Now think about the very first cell phones, okay? Think about the first cell phones. The first cell phones really were just telephones, right? They were just big portable telephones that people would use and call each other. Then next, we had the opportunity to text. Guys, do you remember that first phone? Did you get that first phone where you could text and that was it? You could call and text and that was pretty much everything. I remember that. I remember my first cell phone. That's the only thing I could do would be I could send maybe 10 text messages a month. So the idea is some people saw that texting was like a bell and a whistle, like some new feature. I don't need this for my phone. All I need to do is to call, right? Well, of course, think about your phones today. Think about the basic phone, right? The basic phone. What do we expect on a basic phone? Well, we expect probably a camera, texting, probably some memory that we can use for apps. I mean, now our idea of the basic features has really changed, hasn't it? So now we think of bells and whistles as like the newest technology. Yeah, does your phone have 6 cameras? Does your phone, can your phone swim in water? For example. Now, of course, the question is why bells and whistles? That seems kind of a crazy expression, Mr. John. I mean, my phone doesn't have any bells and it doesn't whistle, right? Well, actually, the expression probably came from these old steam organs. Now, guys, I don't know if you remember the circus. Maybe you had a chance to go to the circus before, but in the old days of the circus, they would have these steam-powered organs. They were called calliopes. And as the cart would move, the steam would produce sound and it would play music. And of course, you hear them in state fairs and places like that. So, of course, when you would get these extra bells and these extra whistles, that's basically, of course, talking about extra things that would make it, new. So if you had a small organ, you had a few bells or a few whistles. And then as it got bigger and bigger, you would have extra bells and whistles. So in this case, now we use the expression because we don't really use steam organs anymore. It just means new features that are very attractive, but not necessary. Okay. So now I'm going to share with you a true story. Okay, this is a true story. One of my friends on Facebook last Sunday posted this message. This is a true message. I did not change anything except their name and their picture. So this was a message that someone posted on my Facebook page this past Sunday. Take a look. So the person said, "Hello, is anyone looking to sell their Apple Watch?" So this person would like to buy an Apple Watch. But look what she says next. "I don't need all the bells and whistles. Just waterproof, 44 millimeters, and in good working condition." And then she says, "Also unlocked. Thank you." Now, guys, I don't know if you have an Apple Watch, but I mean, I think of the Apple Watch as kind of a really nice luxury item. Kind of, again, a lot of my students have them. I got my wife one for Christmas many years ago. So sure, they're very nice, but let's be honest. Is there really a basic Apple Watch? I mean, the Apple Watch is already pretty nice. So of course, when she says, "I don't need all the bells and whistles," maybe she means I don't need the most expensive one, right? Now, Fatima, is this your situation here? You know? I don't know, the Apple Watch. My wife really uses a lot of the features on the Apple Watch. So I don't know. Does somebody here in the class want to share if you have an Apple Watch? Does somebody have an Apple Watch here in the class? They're pretty nice. Oh, yeah.
No.
No, you don't have it. Okay. What do you think about the Apple Watch, Daniela? Do you think it's a necessary basic item, or do you think it's kind of a nice expensive thing? What do you think?
It's expensive, but depend. I don't know. I think you can live without your Apple Watch.
You probably can,
Yes.
yes. But here's a question. 10 years ago, you might say the same thing about the iPhone. I
Yeah.
don't need the
I don't need
iPhone.
that.
I don't need it. And of course, what about today?
I have Samsung, so
Yeah, but still, if I said, "Let me
it's
take your
close,
smartphone,"
yes.
no, don't take my phone. Right? That would be you, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
of course. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah. So Fatima is asking lots of questions here. So Fatima, you're thinking, what good is it going to do? I don't know, Fatima. What do you think? Do you think it's necessary? Do you think you need it?
It's not really. Now I have a lot of people that I know, and they are old people, and they are putting it. And I said to myself, is it for young people or for old? Is she gonna really use it? Because the person that I know, she is a little bit not technology person. So I feel that people making it just to like luxury items to
Yeah.
show that they have the Apple Watch, but I don't know if they really use it. The only person that I think that they may need it, it's the nurses and anybody in the hospitals, because it's like she cannot take the phone in front of the patient and check and those kind of things. She just take a look very quickly and then put her hands away. This, yes, it's useful. But for other people, I don't think so.
Well, I think the important question, Fatima, and I think this is always the key about technology. The idea is technology is there to make our lives easier, but I also think sometimes technology is there to create a new understanding of what's necessary. I mean, let's think for just a moment, like cars. Okay, my wife, we have we have a car right now where we've got a camera, for the back when you back up. Right? Maybe some of you have this on your car, the backup camera. And of course, you have cars with the camera in the front now. Well, now, if you look at cars today, some of those cars have cameras everywhere. They'll show you, if let's say you've got something in the back and you can't see out the back, you can have a full-time camera to let you see out the back. I mean, think about all these things. Now, 20 years ago, we thought, that's not possible. But now technology makes it possible. And suddenly I'm thinking, wait a minute, these are nice things. They make the car safer. They make you a safer driver. So I think in some ways, Fatima, it's kind of a balance, isn't it? How much money do I want to spend and how much is it going to make our lives better? Because that's the thing, right? Technology makes lives better, but the question is, do you think of the iPhone or the Apple Watch as kind of a luxury item? I still think of it kind of as a luxury item. Well, I do, Fatima. So I have a watch. My watch does not have a battery. My watch is solar powered. It's perpetual. So for me, that's kind of important, right? Because many times I'm out, if I'm taking pictures somewhere, I might be out away from electricity for many, many days, and I don't have a chance to charge my watch. So in some ways, I chose not to get something like that. But I think a lot of people are finding lots of useful things with the Apple Watch. Okay, so I agree with you. I think nurses can use it, but I think a lot of people use it, maybe for their health. So anyway, I just thought this was kind of funny that my friend, and guys, I'm honest, I chose for this class, for this lesson, I chose bells and whistles before I saw this message. It's true, honestly. And when I saw it on Facebook, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to share this with the class. It's amazing. It was like suddenly I could think, I could see what my friends were thinking. So anyway, guys, there you go. Bells and whistles. So anyway, well, let's talk about the last expression, okay? All right, so to push the panic button. Now, again, this is one of those expressions that comes from history. So, for example, this was an expression that began for World War II. When pilots would be flying in their planes and something would happen with the plane, they would push a button to help them, evacuate the plane, to eject to safety, because something was going to happen to the plane. Maybe the plane was going to blow up or something. So they would hit what's called the panic button. So now we use this expression in everyday life. In fact, if you look here, these are all from like cartoons or TV shows. So the idea is when we push the panic button, it just basically means to become extremely afraid or nervous when something bad happens or might happen. So if you think something bad's going to happen, you might say, I'm going to push the panic button, like something bad's going to happen. Somebody help us. Well, if you notice, many times people use it in the negative. They will tell people like to relax, calm down. Don't push the panic button right now, right? That's not necessary at this moment. Don't get completely, stressed or panicked at this moment. So in this case, you might see that a lot. Don't push the panic button. So like the characters you see here in the cartoons. Okay, so guys, those are our 3 expressions for this morning. To get wires crossed, bells and whistles, and finally, push the panic button. Okay, so guys, once again, we're going to do like we've done before. I have some short dialogues, very short dialogues here, and some questions for you and your partner to discuss. So situation number 1, don't push the panic button. Situation number 2, bells and whistles. And finally, situation 3, example 3, wires crossed. Okay, so again, we're going to stop presenting. And we'll go into the breakout room. So we've got a good group here with 2 for each one. So how about we do 2 and 2? Okay, guys, our rooms are ready. So we'll go into the breakout rooms, and then I'll come in and share the link to the activity in the chat. All right, I think everyone has returned. All right, so I was listening in on some of the conversations. So let's take a moment maybe to go through a couple of the questions. So I noticed in the first question, some people said, no, we should relax. But then I heard Pilard. Pilard said she panics. Pilard, is that true? Do you push the panic button?
Yes.
So why? Why do you panic? Are you a person who worries all the time?
Yes. I'm worried a lot all the
Oh
time.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, what advice can we give Pilard? Let's help Pilard here.
For
Anyone
the
have any?
small thing, I'm worried.
Yeah, okay, so let's see. Can somebody have some suggestions? How can we help Pilard in this situation?
Panic, it makes the situation worse.
Yeah, but we always do it, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, what can we do? Should we tell Pilard maybe to breathe? Pilard, have you tried breathing sometimes? Maybe counting to 5 first?
Okay. I'm trying.
Or do you start breathing like this? I don't know. I don't know if I know, Pilard. Sometimes we just panic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, Pilard. That's takes practice, I think. I think so. All right. Anyone else have a suggestion for Pilard? Anyone else have any advice? Really? Really? No advice? Tiaba? Daniela, no advice here? What can we do? Come on, let's help. Any suggestions?
I don't know, maybe breathe, but when you are in a panic situation, breathe is hard too.
It is. So what do you do, Daniela, in these situations? Do you panic? Do you panic too?
Sometimes I try to. The last weekend, my daughter fell down and she broke her
Oh
leg
no.
and was bleeding a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. And I was in my panic situation.
Sure.
But then I tried to breathe, stop the bleeding first, try to think what I need to do, and then do it.
Yeah.
So yes, maybe breathe and think is the best advice I can say.
I think that's a good point. I think we have to stop the emotion.
Yes.
And breathing can help us with that. So maybe that's something. Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully your daughter's better now. Okay.
Yeah, she got a glue and now she's fine.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. So Tiaba, any other advice, Tiaba, or do you panic too?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah, but I think breathing and relax. Yeah.
So I think, I don't think there's any like magic thing. I think I think we just got to do it. So
just keep calm.
Yeah. And especially, I think if it's something that happens to your children, I understand it's a emotional thing, but also we have to take care of the problem. So I think that's a good thing to think about too. So all right. Well, Pilard, I don't know if we helped you, but hopefully that'll give us some ideas. All right. Now for the next one, the bells and whistles. Now, I don't know, do you think this might be the difference between men and women? I think men like the bells and whistles. I think when we buy stuff, we like the bells and whistles when we buy things. So what about you guys? How many people here said they also like the bells and whistles? Come on, raise your hand. How many people said they like the bells and whistles when they buy things? Time to be honest. Okay. Okay, so it looks like many of us do. All right.
But John,
Yeah.
my case is different. I raise my hand because I want to say my story.
Okay, let's hear it.
My husband, very quickly, my husband, he is that kind of person who doesn't buy clothes all during all the day.
Mhm.
And he kept telling me, I don't spend money like you always buy clothes and those kind of thing. And we have a discussion 2 years ago, 2 days
Mhm.
ago.
Mhm.
He said to me, you buy all the time a lot of items. I said, yes, they are on sale. They are $1. And I buy a lot because I want to give them away. But yes, you don't buy every day. But when you buy something that is very expensive and it's
I
worth it.
know. I think that is the difference between men
Yes,
and women.
it's what I
Yes.
want to say.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, so for example, I like buying camera stuff. Yeah. So I don't buy camera stuff every day, but you're right. You're right, Fatima. It is expensive. That is true. That is true. But I think we can agree. Sometimes it's hard to say no to the bells and whistles, right? I mean, when we buy things, the bells and whistles make it really nice. They do. They make it really nice. So I'm sure when you're thinking about your next phone, right? You're thinking. I heard Daniela talk about the camera and the memory, right? Those are important things for the new phones, right? I think we like that stuff. Yeah, we see those TV commercials with it. Okay, now the last one here about getting our wires crossed. Again, maybe we apologize when we make mistakes. Maybe we argue. I also think it probably depends on who we're talking to, right? If we're talking to our best friends or if we're talking to family members. So it can be a difficult thing when we get into these situations, right? You said this, oh, I thought you said this. This kind of confusion. So, all right, well, guys, thank you so much for participating. So let's review those expressions one more time here today. To get our wires crossed, the bells and the whistles, and finally, to push the panic button. So hopefully you don't push the panic button. So hopefully not, but I get it. Sometimes we panic, right? Sometimes we do. All right. Now, guys, what I'd like to do here with the remainder of our time is let's return to the topic we started on Tuesday, and that's thinking about career pathways. Now, what we're going to do here this morning is we're going to look at someone, an example of someone who has followed a particular career pathway, and then talk a little bit about our own situations, our own experiences. So I'm going to click on the link here to go ahead and open up the lesson. Now, we looked at some words in our last class, but what I'd like to do now is let's take a look at someone's specific career pathway. Now, first off, her name is Teresa, and what we're going to do is we're going to listen to her situation. Now, as we listen to her situation, let's see what are some things she did to follow her career pathway as a person who perhaps came to the United States, much like you, and was trying to figure out, what's her direction going to be. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to play the little story here, and we're going to read along and find out just exactly what did Teresa do in her career pathway. So let's take a listen, and then we'll come back and think about some of the questions that we can see here for Teresa. All right, so let's listen.
On a career pathway. Teresa Fernandez came to the U.S. 3 years ago. She had a high school diploma, but didn't know a lot of English. She got a job as a home health aide, taking care of an elderly woman in her home. She also took classes at a community college to improve her English. Teresa liked the work and decided to look for a better job in this field. She spoke to a friend who works in a hospital. The friend said, "A career in nursing is a good idea. There are jobs for nurses in hospitals, in doctors' offices, and in clients' homes. I've heard that the demand for nurses is growing." A career counselor can help you explore different career options and choose a career pathway.
Okay, so as we can see from Teresa's situation, she started pretty much in a lot of the same places as you are starting here in the United States. Perhaps you came to the United States, didn't necessarily know a lot of English. Of course, that depends on you and your background. But then, as you can see, she kind of started her career pathway by following certain steps. So, for example, let's take a look here at this little activity. So it says, which questions should we ask ourselves when choosing a career pathway? Now, it says here that there are 4 answers that might be correct. So, for example, let's take a look at these questions. All right, so question A says, when did I come to the U.S.? Question B, which field do I like working in? Question C, do I want to be a nurse? Question D, where could I get a job in this field? Question E, are there many jobs in this field? And question F, who can help me choose a career pathway? Now, let's just use letters. That'll be faster. But which of the 4 questions do you think might be questions that we would ask ourselves in choosing a particular career path? What do you think? So, for example, let's start with question A. Do you think question A is related to the career path? What do you think? Yes or no? Maybe not? Okay. What about question B? Which field do I like working in? Do you think that might be a good question to ask? Okay, so I see a few people think maybe yes. Okay, so maybe we'll choose B as one of our choices. What about question C? Do I want to be a nurse? Possibly, if that's the particular career that you want. So let's put a question mark next to it. Okay, so we'll think about a question mark. All right, what about D? Where could I get a job in this field? Do you think that might be a good question to ask? Yeah, I think that might certainly be important to think about. So maybe we'll choose D. Okay. E, are there many jobs in this field? Do you think that might be a good question to ask? Yeah, certainly if it's a relevant field, that might be good to ask. All right. And then the last one, I think this is a very interesting question. Who can help me choose a career pathway? Do you think that also might be helpful? Okay. All right. So it looks like we agree that F might be the number 4. Well, let's check our answers and see. All right. Very good. Yeah, again, the question here is in thinking about ourselves compared to maybe someone like Teresa. Now, the idea is that Teresa did choose a particular path. Of course, it involved nursing, but notice she did not start, of course, as a particular level of nurse. So in thinking about these questions, which field do I like? Where could I get a job? Are there many jobs? And of course, the last one I think is very helpful. Who can help us? I think that's an important part of this discussion. Now, let's continue on as we find out more about Teresa's path. So, for example, Teresa decides that she's going to talk to a career counselor. So now let's listen to this situation. What did she do in order to help get her on this career pathway? So again, let's listen, and I'll kind of help us follow along as we go.
A week later, Teresa met a career counselor. The counselor explained that there are many kinds of nursing programs, and the programs include courses and clinical work. You can become a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, and help other medical professionals in caring for patients. You have to complete a program and pass a state exam to get your certification. When you start working as a CNA, you'll get on-the-job training. After that, you can complete a more advanced program and get a license to become an LPN, a licensed practical nurse. In the future, you can become an RN, a registered nurse. Now, Teresa is starting to plan her career pathway. She wants to become a CNA. This is her short-term goal. She needs to achieve that goal first, but she still has to decide what her long-term goal is. She wants to become an LPN, but does she want to become an RN after that? Teresa still has to make this choice.
Now, as you can see, when you're dealing with a lot of professions, we see lots of we see lots of words and letters, right? LPN, CNA, RN, all of these things are, again, I don't know every step in becoming a nurse, but the questions that we can consider is to think about, well, we have to start somewhere. And of course, notice one of the things she talked about early on is what particular path might be the beginning in thinking about short-term goals, right? So for example, if you notice in the second paragraph, Teresa is starting with the CNA, right, the Certified Nursing Assistant, which that's very common. A lot of my students often start in this CNA position because it doesn't require a lot of certification. You can take a class or two and then basically get started. So this is something that she did in the short term. But then, of course, thinking about what's the long-term goal. Well, maybe becoming a licensed practical nurse, which requires a little more study. And then finally an RN, which is basically one of the highest levels, a registered nurse. So part of the idea for Teresa was to think about those kind of steps along the way. And in fact, we're going to take a look at those steps right now. So I'm going to go to the next screen. Let's take a look at it. All right, so let's review what Teresa's career pathway looked like. So first, if you'll notice, we have these different numbers, right? Education, okay, long-term goals, short-term goals. So for example, we're following the numbers here, number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to ask different students, let's see what we remember when it comes to her particular educational background, like before she came to the United States. What did she do when she first arrived, and where is she going? So, for example, Tiaba, would you read number 1 here at the bottom? Just read what it says.
Education before US.
So what do you think was her educational experience before coming to the United States?
High school diploma.
Okay, so we'll put high school diploma down there. Okay. All right. Fatima, would you read number 2 here for us?
Okay. Give me a second, I need to zoom it. First job in US.
So, for example, looking at these choices up here, do you remember what her first job was?
In home health aid.
That's correct. Yeah, so I mentioned home health aides. That's a lot of my students do that as their first step. Okay. All right, Daniela, what do you think about number 3? Can you read that one for us?
Yes. Learning English classes.
This one might be easy. So,
Yes.
so for many of you, maybe you're here at this particular step. Okay. All right. Now, in looking at 4, 5, 6, and 7, now we're beginning to think about direction, right? So for example, courses and state exam. So if you recall, the courses and state exam was to think about maybe a CNA program.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so her short-term goal was to become a CNA. That's right. And then as she continues, courses and license, maybe the next step later would be
LPN
License.
program.
yeah. And then finally,
Yeah.
RN.
okay. Well, let's see if we're correct. Congratulations. Now, the reason I think why Burlington is using medical professional is because honestly, here in the United States, this is one of the still strongest areas for a lot of students, especially coming from other countries. In fact, many of my students may have been medical professionals, nurses, or whatever in their countries. But the truth is, many of my students never studied medicine, never studied these things before, but found that this is where there were still lots of employment opportunities. So starting as a home health aide, it's kind of hard work and the pay is not great, but it is a first start. And then, of course, as we learn more English, then we move on in that particular path, right? So again, CNA, that's a pretty good short-term goal. RN, LPN. You know, I've had a couple of students who were medical professionals in their countries when they came to the United States. For example, they might have been dentists, right, or doctors in their country. When they came to the United States, they found out, oh, wait a minute, my doctor, my medical license in my country is not the same as in the United States. So many of them maybe went back to school, maybe had to study for more tests. So I understand it's a very long process. In this case, Teresa, the woman in the video here, or in the audio, her path maybe was a few years, maybe. Some of my students, their paths may be much longer. In fact, many of them might, finish a CNA program and become CNAs and stay CNAs for a while. Others may decide to continue on, but it does get a little more difficult. So more classes, more study, and of course, where I teach at Gateway, that's a pretty common direction for a lot of students. Okay, now I understand that many of you are probably not thinking about work at the moment. Maybe you're thinking of other things, but I do want to think about how I can help, or maybe at least get us to think about our future. Because yes, here we are at step number 3. We're taking English classes, and we try to help as much as we can. Obviously, it's hard sometimes when we're adults, busy lives, like we have busy schedules. So hopefully English classes can help, but we're of course not the only thing. So here's what I would like to do next. Okay, so in just a moment, we're going to return to the breakout room, and we're going to do one more little breakout room activity. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this activity, and then you and your partner can take some time to talk about it. Okay, so now that we've kind of determined Teresa's career pathway, let's think about yours. So in this next activity, I want you to discuss with your partner, what do you think might be the different steps along the career pathway that relate to you? So for example, this will be a chance for you to discuss a little bit of any education or work experience that you had before coming to the United States. Sometimes my students say, Mr. John, that was my job in my other country. I can't use that experience to help me here. But of course, that's not true. Your experience is often what people need. I mentioned in one of my classes, I think of the evening class, I mentioned on Tuesday, we had lots of students who studied other careers in their countries, and they had lots of job experience. They just needed to study, study English, or maybe take a licensing test. People who were professionals in their countries, they just need that type of opportunity, and they were able to find work. Again, maybe some of you have had some first work experiences in the United States. I know Fatima has shared in the past some of her work experience. Maybe you've had some too. And then I also just want you to take some time. Do you have any short and long-term goals? Now, many of you might say, I don't, Mr. John, long-term, that could be many years away. But it's okay to think about those things. I mean, my career is in a different place, but I still have some long-term goals. I still think about the future. Right? So in this case, maybe there are some licenses, maybe some diplomas that you might be thinking about sometime in the future. It doesn't have to be next year, but the idea is we should at least be thinking about those long-term goals. So when you go into the breakout room, I've included Teresa's pathway just again as a reminder of what she did. But now I've also included an example for you to discuss with your partner. Now, for an example, I just want to mention before we go into the breakout room, maybe step 3, learning English. Maybe learning English in our program is only part of your experience. Maybe you studied English somewhere else. Maybe you're thinking you would like to study more English. Some of my students go on to study English at the university if they feel like they need more. Guys, I'd love to help everybody, but unfortunately, I can't necessarily help everyone. So again, maybe that's something you're thinking about too. But now what I want you to do when you go into the breakout room, discuss these different steps. How do they relate to you? Now, some of you, maybe you have more experience than your partner. Maybe you can hear what they have done. But also in thinking about especially step 7, what are some of your long-term goals? Are you thinking you'd like to go back to school? Thinking you'd like to get another job? So that's the idea. Take some time to share those things. Now, when we return to the main room, we'll just talk about some of these things in general. You don't necessarily have to tell us your specific career pathway. But again, maybe we can kind of get a little list. What are some examples of short-term goals from the class? What are some examples maybe of some long-term goals? Okay, so guys, we're going to take about 6 or 7 minutes, maybe a little more, to do this last activity. When we're finished, we'll return to the main room and discuss. So we're going to go back to the breakout rooms, and we'll keep the same groups. Okay, so we'll do that if I can find it. Okay, so guys, when we go into the breakout room, I will return with the link to those particular. All right, I think we're waiting for one more. There she is. Okay. Now I realize that we don't have a lot of time for all of us, each person, to share perhaps your own thoughts about your own career pathways. But for example, Daniela, I noticed you had talked a little bit about your career pathway, and it sounds like yours is kind of similar to our example. Is that correct?
Yes, the same.
Well, share with us
but
a little bit about your career pathway.
I never worked in a home health aid,
Okay.
but I got my CNA program the last month, and
Wow.
I do it. I passed the state exam.
Great.
I was so scared about my English, but I have a good grade, and I do it, and I am happy because I was so scared, but I took a risk.
Well, and so now I think in your conversation you mentioned you're waiting for your license. Is that correct?
Yes, for my certificate to start to work, because I want to work in the hospital,
Okay.
specifically in labor and delivery.
Okay. Wow. And you think maybe in the future you want to become a registered nurse? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's hey, you're off in the right direction. That's great.
Yes, but in the future, when I need to improve my English.
Now,
Thank you.
well, and now certainly, Daniela, one thing I will always share with my students, work will definitely help you improve your English.
Yes, yes. I
And
feel better. I feel better with my
Mhm.
English, um, studying the CNA program,
Sure.
and at the same time my English classes.
Well,
To-
we're glad we could help with part of that. Sure.
What? Sorry.
That I'm glad we could help with part of that. Sure.
Thank you so much. Yes.
But I will tell you this, Daniela, and this is, I think, good advice for everyone. Maybe Fatima, you can share here too. You know, at the beginning, it might be a little difficult. Okay, you know, the English part, a lot of pressure. You know, you'll have to be speaking English right away.
Yes.
So all I can say, Daniela, is don't push the panic button. Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, because again, I've had lots of students very similar where they started that first job, and yeah, that beginning was hard. You know, they said it was very difficult to keep up, but you can do it. Okay, you could do it. You just gotta keep trying.
Yes. Thank you. I went my first week. I went to my classes
Uh huh.
of CNA program.
Yeah,
Shaking.
I'm sure.
Okay. Yes. Very, very scared, but then I go through the program
Hmm.
with help of my classmate and my instructor, and I do it, and I'm happy.
Well. First off, again, congratulations, Daniela. That's great.
Thank you.
All right. And I also do want to mention to everybody, yeah, English classes, I think the one thing I just want to mention here, the career pathway, some people think, okay, I do English classes and then I just, continue on. Not necessarily. You know, the truth is, Daniela and Fatima, I think, can also share. Sometimes we need a little more English classes, maybe at this point of the career pathway. You know, sometimes we need to return and do a little bit more. So don't consider that a bad idea either. Now, sometimes I might tell students, okay, time to move on a little bit. But certainly students sometimes say, Mr. John, can I come back and study a little more? I think sometimes they get a little nervous. They feel the same way. But honestly, Daniela, I think that's an important thing to remember. Of course, students can always come back and improve their English, but I think work will also help you do that. Fatima, what can you share with us?
What I want to say to Daniela, my experience.
Uh-huh.
My English was good when I was at school. I was among the first people all the time, but it's like because I didn't use it after getting graduate from school in my country. It's like I lose a lot of vocabulary. Once I came here, I learned something that I did never learn it in my country because it's English, not British.
Mm-hmm.
And especially those words that we use them in the daily life, so they cannot teach you those words at school
Sure,
because they
sure.
are not American people.
Sure.
Well, the only thing that I want to say to Daniela, don't be shy, never ever. So because if you feel embarrassed, if you feel shy while you are talking to American people, you're gonna learn nothing. And what helps me a lot, every time you tell us a word, I try to use it. And it's like the co-worker, they are impressed. They say, from where do you get this word, Fatima? I want to say from Mr. John. So try to use it and use it and use it. This is the key.
Thank you.
Because if don't use the words, you're gonna learn nothing. And another one last thing. If you don't understand somebody, say, I don't understand. Stop them.
Yes.
Don't pretend that you are knowing what he is saying.
That's a good
Because you're
point.
gonna get embarrassed at the end when you're gonna not know what to say. Just
Or-
stop them.
or it
Because
could
I
be
feel
worse,
that the
yeah.
same way. I
Mhm.
feel it in the first time people talk to me, and they was fast. That was my problem, because they was talking fast and they cannot catch them. I know the words, but I cannot catch people.
Mhm.
But once I stop them and I say, please, can you see it just a little bit easy, not that fast, I understand.
Mhm.
And then if you don't understand something, they can explain it. There is a good people wherever you go. As there is a bad, there is a good. But try
Yes.
to do that. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Fatima, that's what I tell students a lot. There are good people everywhere and there are jerks everywhere. So the truth is, yes, I think we can't be embarrassed. So let's see, Pilar, did you have something to share?
No, just for me, for the English is very only time when you stay close the American people when she's speaking is very difficult to understand. But when she talks to her, go slowly. When she goes slowly, you try to understand. All the time when I go to the interview, when I start the interview, I say to the people, please can you go slowly because
Mhm,
English is not my first language, but go slowly. She say, okay. When she goes slowly, the conversation start. I'm trying to talk. It's difficult, but I try all the time.
Well, that's what you can do. That's the best you can do, Pilar, is to do your best. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah, and listen, hey, my Spanish is pretty good. I mean, my Spanish is pretty good, but sometimes students will say something to me and I'll look at them for a few minutes and say, do you mean this, or could you say that again? So I think it's a good advice for all of us to ask questions when we need help. But honestly, first off, I appreciate everyone sharing your thoughts and opinions here. And again, congratulations to Daniela there. That's great news. I didn't realize I was maybe I should change this story. So maybe for the evening class, we won't call it Teresa's career pathway. We'll call it Daniela's career pathway. Is that okay, Daniela?
Thank you.
We'll change the name of
That's good.
Teresa here. Okay, very good. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing. Now, real quickly, just want to remind everybody that our session is coming fast to an end. I do realize it's very, very short, so our final class will be next Tuesday. But again, I just want to remind most of you, not all of you, but most of you will need to return to register again. So you should be getting an email from me probably in about a week with the active link for registration for July. If you are going to continue with us into the July session. The July session will be July 15th to August 1st. So again, I'll send all of this information out in email. Again, this does not apply to everybody. Some of you came in and registered early. But the idea is the week of July 8th will be our next testing and registration. And of course, this is for any of your friends who might want to join us during that time. And again, remember that we will continue Burlington English Access until July 8th. You'll have to register again. But keep in mind, if you can't join us in July, of course, we will have registration in August. Okay, so as you can see, our class is getting smaller and smaller. People are vacationing and so on. So we'll see how Tuesday goes. So, all right, well, guys, the last day of our spring or summer session number 1, whatever you want to call it, will be next Tuesday. So, guys,